Welcome to the Know Your Fundamentals podcast, the show designed to help professional moms like you empower your well-being, strengthen family bonds, and excel in your career while thriving your way. I'm your host, Kelly Berthold, a fellow professional mom, licensed clinical social worker, wellness educator, advocate, and coach. And I created this podcast to provide a space where we can connect foundational principles of well-being with real-life, actionable insights that help us feel more connected to ourselves and others. If you're juggling life, family, and career while seeking balance and authentic connection, this podcast is for you. Each episode we'll hear from our neighbors, uncover the extraordinary in ordinary life, find patterns that help us recognize opportunities for well-being, and get practical, fundamental tips to thrive in your wellness, relationships, parenting, and professional life. You're the expert on you, and I'm here to help you thrive your way. I'm so glad that you're here. Let's jump in. Hi, this is Kelly Berthold, and welcome to Know Your Fundamentals. Today, I have Briel Beaty with us, who is the co-director of the Pennsylvania School of Herbalism. She also is a traditional Western herbalist, a Reiki teacher, and certified Iyengar, if I said that right, yoga teacher, which is an alignment-based yoga. So Briel, she's multifaceted, but today she's going to talk to us about practical holistic herbalism and how to harness the power of nature's remedies using simple, accessible methods to enhance your health and the well-being of your family and community. So welcome, Briel.
Thank you.
That was a pretty clean intro, I think.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. But thanks for joining us today. So tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're passionate about, and we'll kind of just start from there.
Okay, so I love plants. I love medicinal plants specifically. So I enjoy teaching people about plants. I do also do herbal consultations, but more of my practice is education, herbal education, and also growing. Yeah.
So, even like being able to kind of talk about like herbal education. So it sounds like it's so simple, and I'm sure it's also like very complicated because like I've met you and I've like gone to your house and you're like, oh, this is asparagus. And I'm like, oh, I've never seen asparagus before in my entire life from the ground. Right. So to you, it's just like, this is this, and this is what you can do with it. And I'm like, I've been around this my entire life and I had no idea. And I'm 36 years old. Right. So what are some of the things about just knowing what you know and like your interest in herbalism? Where did it kind of start for you that you became interested in, it's different than farming, right? So there's a particular interest here that is more uniquely your own. Do you mind just kind of sharing more about that?
Yeah. So I'd say I grew up in a family that my parents cultivated nature appreciation for sure. We had a big woods behind my house and spent a lot of time in the woods. My dad foraged for mushrooms, though at the time my mom wouldn't let us eat them, but now she also forages for mushrooms. But they had big gardens in the front. And so I feel like I was always around plants. When I started to get interested in medicinal uses of plants was actually one of my friends in high school was overprescribed a drug for like a acne medication drug called Bactrim. And the way that when you take that, they're supposed to check your liver numbers like very regularly. But because he had been given too much too quick, by the time they checked his liver numbers, his liver was like liquefied. So he ended up having to get on like a transplant list and being life flighted. It was like pretty epic. He spent many weeks, like he's 18 or 17 or something at the time. And so while he was on this liver transplant list, his mom knew this chiropractor and they started giving him some herbs. So some of the herbs he took were skullcap, golden seal, and milk thistle, which are like liver supportive herbs. And he ended up never needing the liver transplant. So I was kind of like, oh, there's something to this. And having seen him, hit so low during that. And I think having had the background of being, exposed to nature a lot as a child and seeing my parents grow things and stuff, that really sparked my interest. And then I kind of just did a lot of self-study for many years. I started my first formal herbal training in 2014, I guess it was.
Wow. Yeah. So, it's funny how like sometimes there's like these intersections between, oh, I just naturally grew up around this thing, and then there's events
Hmm.
that really elicit like a deeper curiosity
Right.
over something, and like this deeper awareness, like this shock factor, right? How is that friend doing now? Are they doing okay?
I lost touch with him actually like years ago, but I mean, I know he's still alive and well, so
Okay.
I
That's
feel like that's great, right? And
yeah.
yeah, definitely that is one of the things that made me be like, oh, there's more to plants than just food, because there's obviously so much, we can do with diet when it comes to herbalism or to plants. But I like thinking about herbalism like a spectrum. Sometimes I call it the plant medicine spectrum, and that's pretty much like you have this full range of like from food plants all the way to poison, and like in the middle is like medicine plants, and there's kind of they can, and it's like doesn't mean if the plant goes more towards the poison side it's not medicinal, it's more of a dosage thing. So it's like there are a lot of herbs you can take every day regularly tonically that like nourish and nurture you more like foods, and then there's ones that are more like medicine, and then there's some that are used, in short bursts or for acute conditions, but that if you take too much of them they can be poisonous. So there's kind of this whole scale, right?
Hmm.
And dose and preparation can affect where something goes on that scale too.
Yeah, yeah. So, like how it's prepared, how it's stored, time of use, whether it's probably like something that you ingest or something that's topical. So
Exactly.
those are some of like the different kind of categorical spaces that you may be describing there.
Right. Yeah. So for example, like a lot of people are familiar with arnica, which is often like a cream you can get over the counter. And it's usually like a homeopathic form of arnica, which just means there's a very small amount of the actual plant in the end product. And arnica is a strong anti-inflammatory, but it's a low dose herb. So it's an herb that like you can take it internally if you make a tincture or something, but you just take a few drops for a few days in a row, a few times a day. Like, and that's if you had like a sprain, strain, some kind of acute injury that might require that, but you wouldn't want to take that internally every single day because it can cause some liver or kidney damage. So that's like an example. And that is why I think a lot of times that's in the stores, you find that in topical forms, because it's safer in topical forms than
Yeah,
ingesting it.
really diluted, and
Mhm.
yeah, so like it's safe without direction, right? Beyond what is
Exactly.
minimally communicated, like on a bottle, right? So we'll
Exactly.
kind of just also preface here acknowledgments and disclaimers. Brielle nor myself are communicating that you should directly just apply anything that we're having a conversation about during, this podcast recording, and using it as education and information and maybe further exploration. Maybe even
Mhm.
contact Brielle if you're curious about learning more, because this is what you do. You do the education piece, which we'll talk
Right.
about here in a moment. But when it comes to having someone go from like learning, you said that you were self-taught, right? Self-read in a lot of this material. Did you have mentors, or were there certain programs or different ways that you learned, um, or a community that you were able to kind of like learn and increase like this education for yourself?
So I think when I first was really learning, I was doing a lot of like reading or listening, um, reading books, like trying herbs. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, so there was like we had some very cool like, traditional Chinese medicine shops, and there were some Ayurvedic places, and so I was kind of dabbling in that stuff. But then in 2014, I signed up for a homestead herbalism class, which was like a year long, and we met once a month for the whole year and covered a lot of like plant basics and how to make things. And it was a really hands-on class. And that teacher, who was Susan Hess, she's very good at making things taste good. So that was kind of a fun into like how do we make herbs enjoyable and bring them into life. She has an herbal cookbook actually now that's really great. And then after that, I went to a more clinically focused herbalism program in Ithaca, New York, called the Northeast School of Botanical Medicine. And Seven Song runs that. And he is more, like I said, clinical, but also he's kind of a self-taught botanist. So part of our education was botany. And I think that is really important if you're interested in using plants. Is you don't have to, study botany in detail, but you do have to know how to identify plants. You never want to, consume or use something that you haven't for 100% certainty identified properly. So there's some really simple ways. I think even one of the first things I started with botany is there's a book called Botany in a Day, and they actually have a website for it too. And you can get a lot of the information free, but there are plant families. So plant families have resemblances to each other. Like the aster family is also called the sunflower family. So thinking about like a disc flower with actually that's many flowers. It's not just one, like a dandelion, a sunflower, a daisy, all of those we think about that as just one flower. But if you look small through a little loop, each one of those petals or each one of those center holes is actually its own flower. So that's something about that plant family. They always have that, right? So if you learn, like, mint family is so easy. It's like one of the first ones to learn. It has square stems and the leaves are opposite on the stems and the flowers are irregular, which means that if you cut them in half twice, you don't have four symmetrical parts.
Interesting. So these categories also share some similar herbal profiles. Besides how they look, they may also act somewhat similarly as if they were ingested or topically applied, or not necessarily the same
Not
thing.
necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. It's a good question though. And you can also use different parts of plants. So you might have a plant like dandelion, for example, which is a weed just growing in your yard, right? So don't kill your dandelions, use them. But you can use the flower, the leaf, and the root. And the upper parts, the aerial parts, are used very differently than the root. The root is nutritive. The root is bitter, which is good for your liver, your gallbladder, helps your digestion, kind of detoxifying, cleansing the body. And the leaf I wouldn't put the leaf into the liver category. It's more of a diuretic, making you go to the bathroom. It's nutritive. It has a little bit of, demulcent quality, which just means a little soothing. And so they're just, even though it's all the same plant, it's a totally different thing. And so that happens a little bit too. In the mint family, for example, there are a lot of aromatic mint, like you would think about peppermint or spearmint or something. But there's also mints that are non-aromatic and they tend to be more bitter. And generally in herbal medicine, the more bitter plants are more medicinal and would be more towards that less food spectrum, right? It's something you're not going to want to drink as an enjoyable cup of tea. It's going to be not as pleasant generally.
This is really fascinating, right? So being able to kind of say all these things and to have such awareness and introspection about how, I mean, a medical provider, at least who you would hope, has this understanding of these properties and how they impact an individual and what parts of the body they impact and things like that, right? So to have that much curiosity in herbalism, where would you say that it makes you feel? And where was it that you had this interest that it just kind of touched into your unique passion? Where did that develop?
I feel from the plants, because it's so hands-on. You can experience them, right? You can smell them, touch them, taste them. There's a hands-on experience. I do much better when I can it's not all theory and it's there's action, right? I can plant a seed and watch that seed grow and see it through the different seasons and see its life cycle and see how it makes me feel, and so that, and in some way it kind of gets to my focus in herbalism is really holistic herbalism, because I think, and I'll talk about what that means in a second, but we live in a society where a lot of people are familiar with herbs, but many times they're used in more of what I would consider an allopathic way, which is allopathic medicine is our, modern day kind of standard medicine. And how that usually works is oh, you have these symptoms, this medication treats these symptoms, and that's what you do. You give this for that. And a lot of herbs can be used that way. You could do herbalism in an allopathic way, which means like, like I did mention, like with the arnica, like that would be kind of more of an allopathic use of arnica, where a more holistic view would be, it's a little different in an acute situation where you sprained your ankle, the cause of that. But if you had something, say like fibromyalgia or IBS, where you have a chronic inflammatory condition in some part of your body, instead of just like, okay, let's make, the pain go away, or let's make sure you like digest better, it would go more towards like, why is that happening in the first place, right? What is the state of your body? Like what are the factors that are contributing to that state? And so I think holistic thinking does require a curiosity, right? And I think that's really important. And if I do nothing else for you today or for any of my students when I'm teaching, I hope that I, can instill a sense of curiosity in someone, like an inquiry, right? Like, why? Oh, like, even if you're just in movement, like, oh, you hurt your shoulder. Why did you hurt it? Like, thinking through, like, what are the muscles that are weak? What are the actions that you took? What is the posture that you're holding, right? And so instead of just like, okay, let me put a Band-Aid on that thing, what is the source of the symptoms, right? Because the symptoms are just your body speaking to you, really, whether it's mentally or physically.
Yeah.
Those symptoms are our communication. And so we don't want to suppress those. There are times to suppress them. Of course, there are times when we want to treat something in an allopathic way, but I think we need to be conscious of when we do that and when we want and need to think more holistically.
Mm-hmm. That the allopathic way is useful when you understand the holistic understanding of the deeper rooted issues, right? So it's a part of a puzzle and a part of treatment potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's the only thing, only fixing things in the short term, Band-Aid solutions tend to be problematic and lead to chronic issues in the long term, right?
Right.
So being able to think about this in a well-being perspective, and this is some of this stuff that I try to share with my contributions in the podcast, is when it comes to holistic curiosity and the perspective of our entire experiences, there's a mind-body connection. And anytime that we're feeling any kind of symptom, whether it's a physical, mental, or emotional symptom, it is communicating. It's a messenger. So how am I willing to be present with what is going on in the symptoms my body is communicating that information, and that I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to have some detective perspective in seeing things as they are and wondering where they may be coming from, or wondering what could have been the past, present, or future in finding long-term solutions.
Mm-hmm.
I think something that we tend to struggle with in today's society, because there's so much easy access to, I can just buy a bottle of this, right? And I can just take it, right? And so we have a hard time with instant gratification and seeing and taking the time to just be present and be comfortable with just being present with what our experience is, because we don't trust ourselves in knowing how to experience it in a way. And because we don't feel like we can trust ourselves in that experience, we run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So how do you feel like in your herbalistic approach, and even maybe with your being at the yoga and the Reiki, harnessing that curiosity, like existing and being present with what something is? How do you support yourself in that exploration? And how do you take that wisdom and you also help your, I would say your clients, but like your students in engaging in that curiosity and that exploration without them overly judging themselves and like trying to push it away, push that discomfort away?
Right. Yeah. I think for this, I'm going to pull yoga into it, because I think this is very much how I teach yoga. And also the style of yoga that I teach is, it's not flow. So it's not very fast. Not to say we don't sometimes move fast, but generally there's a little bit more holding or like repeating postures so that you can know what's happening in your body, right? It's just, there's a little more space created. And so I like to, bring up for people like this pain versus this comfort thing. Because a lot of people, the second they feel like uncomfortable, they move away from something. And we could look at that in like a mind thing or a body thing, right?
Or both.
So, right. If you're feeling, say you enter a posture, whether it's a yoga posture or some other physical activity, and it's uncomfortable and you move away from it, there are times to move away from that, right? If there's a sharp pain, if it's a pain that is going to cause you future pain, you move away from that. That is what I would call pain. But if it's just uncomfortable, it's an uncomfortable situation. Well, life is kind of uncomfortable. So I think if we can learn to be okay with awkward, uncomfortable situations, putting your body into a weird posture that you'd rather not be doing, but like here you are in a class and you're just there and you're really in it and you're observing, okay, why don't I like this posture? Or why is this easy for me? Or why is this hard for me? Because it's very easy to just go about the motions, right? But if you start to kind of ask yourself, oh, why is this the easy pose? What's happening in my musculature that allows that to be that way, right? Or if it's a food thing or a taste thing, and come back to kind of herbs, like, why do I crave sugar all the time? Thinking about that, like, what am I craving in that? Like, what am I missing? And we kind of ask those questions. It becomes less like I am this way or this is how it is, and more like there are possibilities and things that can be shifted if you choose to do them. And we obviously can't shift everything all the time. So I think just, focusing on what's in front of you at any moment to your capacity is about all we can do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Mentally wise, just kind of not saying that these have to be the definitions or words, but oftentimes I'll say dialectically, it's being able to exist with that multiple truths can exist at the same time, that I can accept reality as it is and not like it.
Right.
And by even accepting what in experiences, I can do better to actually focus more on what is in my control by accepting all of that reality and even do better with it. Right. So the likelihood of being more proactive versus just habitually reactive exponentially increases when we can just go, oh, this is what it is. Now what?
Right.
Now what do I do?
Yeah. I mean, with yoga, a thing I always tell students is like, there's really no point, like, especially in a group class, right? You have tons of people doing 1,000 different poses because, everybody's body's different, or in the gym, wherever you are, whatever activity you're doing. There's no sense in looking at somebody else and saying, I can't do that, because they still have work to do. No matter where you're at, there's work to be done. And as you progress, maybe your pose gets quote unquote better. The work just changes. It doesn't get easier. It just gets more complicated in many ways, right? So if you've been doing triangle pose, for 10 years, the triangle pose you're doing now, if you really do it and apply everything you've done leading up to this triangle pose, like, it's harder than the triangle pose you did before, but back then that was your work, right? And so I think we have to do the work that's in front of us and not the work that we wish we had to do, because it doesn't matter. The work will never end, right? It doesn't matter how long you live this life. There'll always be things to be worked on. So you might as well work on like what's right in front of you and available to you.
Yeah. Yeah. The expectation of a destination will only perpetuate your misery.
Right.
That's what sometimes I say. And that might sound very philosophical, but like bringing it back to, you have a curiosity about herbs, and you're able to see more. Like if I pick up a dandelion and I go, oh, I can smudge this on my face and have a yellow mark. And that is the extent, or as much as I can possibly know about a dandelion, worth at that point of time. Right. And you can pick up the same thing and have so much curiosity and interest in knowing what goes beyond. And even, from the petals to like maybe even like seasonally and how it looks from being willing to go from not knowing to knowing, and understanding that learning and that growing will continue, and you're willing to kind of follow that. So being willing, that willingness, right? That willingness and that interest, for where I am as an individual, and I can make all these connections that you're talking about from my education experience, which is absolutely not related at all to herbalism, right? Or even like yoga. I will say that I am a extremely tight individual and have very tight hamstrings, right? So I can understand your competency based on your curiosity, because I understand that curiosity too in a different way based on my passions and me practicing being and exploring the things that I have spent a lot of time also doing. But it's applicable across areas of my life, right? So how you apply your willingness and your curiosity, and how do you find that is helpful for you as an herbalist and what we're describing even right now? Because you strengthen those muscles, right? So they're helpful for you in this exploration here with what you're doing and what we're talking about with this topic.
Yeah. So while you were talking about that, this one thing that I keep thinking about, it kind of relates to the quote I have too. But so like plants are fascinating because they always show their past, present, and futures. Like, think about it. If you go outside right now, you're going to see the like remnant bodies of like the dried fall plants that are not alive anymore. But in that is their present moment, but their past is kind of there because the dead parts. But many of them have either buds or seeds on them. So the future is kind of just waiting, right? Or like under the ground, there's like, the roots that haven't like reemerged for a plant. So like, I think we all have that in us at all times, right? All of those, but it's harder for us to see. I think we get stuck on like the past or stuck on the future, and not like, but the present encompasses all of those things, right? And I am going to share the quote I pulled up because I feel like it's perfect for this moment, which is, it's from Rumi. And don't think the garden loses its ecstasy in winter. It's quiet, but the roots are down there riotous. Right? So even though it looks like everything is dead and frozen outside right now, those roots are just waiting for the right time to like come out and to emerge. And I feel like, I think if you start to answer your question kind of about cultivating curiosity, I think if you can start to see that there is potential in everything, including you, like everything has this like potential energy in it, then that creates a little bit of curiosity, because you're like, oh, what is the potential in this wall that's sitting next to me, right? What could become of this wall? Or what is the potential of like, oh, I bought this bag of carrots at the store and I don't know what to do with it. What's the potential of that? There's so many things you could do, turn those carrots into, right? That's their potential, right? And so, I think just thinking about, and I think too, like not worrying about messing it up, right? Like if you're thinking about cooking, and one of the things I wanted to say is like a fundamental for herbalism today is just start putting more herbs and things, like just experiment. Like the recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of parsley, throw in 3, or like stick some extra like garlic in there, or throw in a cinnamon into something that you wouldn't think to put it in, right? And so there's so much potential of like learning and curiosity. And worst case scenario, you're like, I didn't like that, but you learned something. But then occasionally you're going to be like, oh wow, that was really cool, right? That was kind of a tangent, but
it wasn't a tangent. So, even just kind of connecting like some of those dots to that, when we can be more non-judgmentally accepting of the reality and bring a curiosity rather than a judgment. Judgment is always a part of us. We're human beings. We're meant to discern, right? Judgment is our way of like analyzing. But if it's just that, or if it's overcompensating, it decreases our aptitude for creativity. And creativity really can only come from being open and curious. And again, like being able to have just that space of something else can exist here. And I'm willing to just walk in the dark a little bit and see what happens. and not just run away from the dark and not just rush to turn the light on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we can give some of this opportunity to have playfulness even in like our lives and see what that potential may be. We can live more authentically in the moment of seeing what could actually just bloom. I'll use a blooming word, right? But what can bloom because we're leaning into that opportunity, right? So opportunities for authenticity come from us practicing being and curious through our moment to moment experiences, right?
Right. Yeah. So like I thought of a project everybody could do like as the spring comes on, right? You want to cultivate curiosity in plants, just like pick a patch of your yard. And if you have sprayed your yard, I forgive you, but just don't spray it next time so that you can do this activity. But just pick a patch and like really get down there and look at what's actually there. Because if you sprayed many times where like it's only grass, that's all that's growing. But if you haven't sprayed, or maybe you did spray, but you go to the edge or you go to a park and do this, you're going to start to notice like how many different plants are actually growing in the lawn. And some of those are medicinal plants. We usually have grasses. A lot of people really don't like this plant called, sometimes it's called ground ivy. Sometimes it's called creeping Charlie or henbit. But that's actually, it's in the mint family. So we're going to come back to our mints, but it's a really wonderful medicinal plant. It's aromatic. It makes great tea. It's got these little purple flowers on it. People try to destroy that plant, but like it's right there and it's good for pollinators. So like you can drink it, you can smell it. The pollinators like it. So you just pick a little patch and you just observe what's there, right? And if that all that's there is grass right now because you did spray, if you watch over time, it will change, right? And that's that kind of change that we're talking about. But you might have a dandelion there. You might have a clover. You might have plantain, which is like, there's two kinds of plantain. There's a broadleaf and a lance leaf plantain, but they have these like long veins in them, right? And that's actually like, you want like basic herbalism. Like the first thing I'll teach kids if I'm working with them is called a plantain spit poultice. You take that, and if you have like a bee sting or a cut or something, you chew it up in your mouth and you spit it out and you stick that on your cut. It has like a drawing and soothing action. So it's like soothing for the skin, and it's just right out there in your yard. You can eat it too. Not the tastiest, but you can.
And you can even use your own spit. So what's better?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, but even like you talking about those things quick too, that the keeping up with the Joneses and the people pleasing of like, well, what will people think, right? We focus just more on our internal experiences and focus more on our own personal wellness. It tends to have butterfly effects where you're now like, as a byproduct of you focusing on your own well-being and things that are naturally a part of your ecosystem, right? Just around you, you can help make your community a better place. And you also model to your family and your children for future generations that these things are helpful as well. So how does the family and the community aspect really connect with you and your unique interests when it comes to the work that you do collectively?
I think it's really important to cultivate like that curiosity we're talking about in nature, in children from a young age, right? But really everybody, because the more people appreciate nature, the more they can get the benefits from it. And also, like I think people feel better in their nature, and that also helps us like save our natural spaces and things like that. So I do a lot of work right now at Remedies, which is a sculpture garden, like out just across the line in Center Hall. It's only like 15 minutes from State College, but there's a community herb garden we started, and it's not a community garden like you usually see where people have different plots. It's a whole garden space. I think we just added like 500 more square feet. It's probably like going to be 1,000 square feet. There's also a children's area, but it's a place where there's lots of medicinal plants growing, and you can go physically see, taste, touch. They're all labeled, and learn about those plants. And so we have community events there. We'll have more this spring coming up. And also we have a volunteer night, like every other Tuesday night this year is what we're going to do, where if you want to like get your hands in the dirt and like learn about some plants in a free way and also like help the community, because Remedies is a nonprofit. So they do a lot of great like outdoor educational things, then that's a way that you could do it. And I like doing that kind of work, just getting out and getting people just even thinking about the possibility that, oh, plants could do something for them, right? Or, and it could be as simple as like, throwing more herbs in the food you cook, or, making your own, elderberries are really common like this time of year and people are sick. Like it is so easy to make elderberry. They sell this elderberry stuff at the store. It's so expensive. It's like $15 for 2 ounces. You can literally buy just some dried elderberries and you can either make elderberry tea, or you can make a syrup, or you can make a tincture. And it just involves either like simmering the elderberries or pouring alcohol over them or pouring glycerin. Like it's so easy, right? And it's a lovely, really delicious tea that all the kids, everybody will drink. So you could be the community herbalist simply by, oh, there's a picnic in my neighborhood, or there's like, oh, it's a block party. Like I'm just going to make a big pitcher of elderberry tea and everyone's going to drink that. And then you've given everybody like some immune support while you brought your potluck dish. So.
Yeah. And cultivating that curiosity besides like maybe something you're just picking up from a national chain store, right? So we all have these different things that we can do to like, we don't have to be experts like you are necessarily, but if we're curious and we want to get involved, we can pursue those opportunities and just experiment and play with it, right? So where would individuals, you're talking about running mead, maybe you can send me the email address and I'll put it in my show notes.
Yeah.
And do you teach classes? Do you have like programs where, if individuals were interested in learning more, or certain websites or resources that you would recommend people like start with, if you want to plug any of those?
So the Herb School website is paherbschool.com, and it's run by my sister and I. So we have classes both online, so you could take those anywhere, as well as in the State College area, and then also in the Indiana, Pennsylvania area. So we're kind of hitting Western and Central PA. And we usually have like a class every month. We also have like a holistic foundations program. I only have like one spot left in that this year, but we do have as well like free plant walks throughout the summer. And there's a botanical gathering at Remedies that I help host called the Hawthorne Botanical Gathering in June. And that's like a full 2 days of herbal education. So one other thing we do, kind of bringing it back to community as well, is most of our classes at the PA Herb School are sliding scale. So it's not just a one price, but there's a range so that you can pay what's affordable and doable for you. So that's one way that I really try to make sure that we can reach more people.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, Briel, one thing that I try to do with like my guests too is just do the pillars of human flourishing, which are awareness, insight, connection, and purpose. And just seeing that like oftentimes we see the same particular patterns between individuals, even though their interests may vary. Some of the things that are leading to like human flourishing include awareness, insight, and connection, purpose in your own life. So through your upbringing, you became aware of the benefits of being outdoors, connection to nature, connection to your environment. Through that has led to further insight that these certain things were like really important and you were passionate about. And so it prompted you to want to pursue deeper insight about how this could affect yourself or other people. That has also led you to developing programs that are helping you connect more deeply with your community and providing a apothecary type of service. And at the same time, you're allowing for opportunities for education and focusing on things that are more naturally based and holistic again, that tend to be much more beneficial for us mentally, emotionally, and physically, and also socially as a society. Right. And so would you say that these things are leading you to feel very meaningful and purposeful in your activities in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. And if you want to share other events or another season of herbalism in the future, I hope you'll come back. But thank you. And that wraps up the show.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Fundamentals podcast. I hope this episode gave you some valuable tools and helped you feel more connected to yourself and others. Get more life, family, and career fundamentals when you follow Know Your Fundamentals on social media. including Instagram and YouTube. You can also join the Fundamentals Life, Family, and Career Wellness Facebook group. There you'll get access to live trainings, helpful resources, Q&As with our guests, and professional mom community that's here to support you in thriving your way. I'm cheering you on, and I hope to hear from you soon.